There seems to be a lot of controversy surrounding The Rise of Skywalker in regards to fan service. The Rise of Skywalker's critics often cite JJ's attempts to bend over backwards to please the fans that hated The Last Jedi as the reason they didn't like the film, stating that it was boring and lacked imagination. And they seem to blame the hardcore fans in their criticisms as well, saying that this installment is purely an attempt to please them, and so it comes off more like fan fiction. And even Rian Johnson himself had some comments about the fan service in this movie. In an interview with Radio.com, he said catering to fans rather than challenging them is a mistake. He said, "I think approaching any creative process with making fans happy would be a mistake that would lead to probably the exact opposite result." Rian definitely has a unique perspective. Though his contribution to the Disney trilogy wasn't just made with his singular vision in mind, he seemed to go out of his way to subvert fans' expectations, or in other words, to actively not give them what they want. And I actually never thought at the time that just staying true to the character of Luke was fan service, as it seems mostly just good storytelling to me. But that is not how Rian Johnson sees it. His approach was that if the fans will love it, then let's do the opposite. And over in interviews he repeated that this movie was not made for fans. He failed to realize that in taking that approach, he wound up with a story that didn't make sense to the overarching plot of the trilogy, or to the legacy characters themselves. And so it is the most disjointed and illogical installment to the Skywalker saga. And something as simple and as meaningful as Luke having his green lightsaber when he used force projection at the Battle of Crate would not only have made for a pleasing moment for fans, but more importantly would have made the most sense for his character. We were denied even that for a reason I cannot fathom. And while I admit some seem very pleased about the inclusion of things in Episode 9 that seem to retcon what Rian Johnson did, as well as the inclusion of familiar faces and locations, but honestly, all the things they cite as fan service is actually not what I would consider fan service to be. The definition of fan service is something included in a material that will specifically please fans. But good fan service can accomplish much more than that. Fan service executed well can resonate very deeply with fans. It sticks with them. They continue to think about it, to appreciate it. Fan service has to be incorporated well into the story to achieve that. And to have a line in there that addresses Luke's being wrong about the way he treated his father's lightsaber, that means nothing to the story, and so it comes across as superficial. Also, the moment at the end of Rise of Skywalker with Rey calling on all the Jedi, and then you hear their voices. This could be described as a misfire in regards to fan service. Many are saying that it was hard to pick out who was who among the voices. Ahsoka Tano had one word spoken at this time, though if you hadn't seen the Clone Wars series, you wouldn't have known that, or had been excited about it. But having them also visually manifest behind Rey could have made this a million times better for fans. To actually see your favorite Jedi again like Mace Windu, Obi-Wan, Anakin, Luke would have struck a very strong emotional chord with fans that they wouldn't be able to stop talking about it. That is fan service at its best. An example of truly excellent fan service, Avengers Endgame. This is one of the best examples of fan service done right, hands down. One thing that has continued to amaze me with the Marvel Cinematic Universe was that it was clear that story for the most part came first with these movies. Even for the first Avengers, Kevin Feige took his time. It took 4 years and 5 films to set up the first team-up movie. First, each character had to be introduced, developed, and their stories interwoven together. Marvel Studios was created because it was such a huge undertaking. And an even more monumental achievement was the culmination of 23 movies, that is, the Infinity Saga. All of these movies, consisting of 3 phases, had to be interwoven with continued character development and growing relationships. And the final installment focused on the original Avengers and had a satisfying conclusion of their stories. The plot in that movie was epic, which is the key to fan service being used effectively. And without that good story that has you engrossed, it just comes across as weak and ineffective. A specific example that stood out to me from that movie was Captain America being worthy to wield Thor's hammer. an epic moment that also served as an important part of the story and the character's journey. What fans want the most from franchises like this is for their beloved characters that they've become attached to are honored, with a satisfying conclusion to their story that they've been so invested in. So I agree to a certain extent about the complaints some have regarding the fan service in Rise of Skywalker, only because what is in that movie cannot be called true fan service. Rian Johnson goes on to comment that when he goes to the movies, he wants to have the same feeling he did when he saw Empire Strikes Back. The Last Jedi isn't even in the same league as that film. The biggest thing missing in The Last Jedi wasn't fan service. It was good storytelling. Nothing happens that contributes to the overarching plot of the trilogy. There's no character development, no growth in the relationships between the three main characters. This is the exact opposite of The Empire Strikes Back. And does fan service mean it's predictable, that you don't have twists and turns or unexpected things happen? Absolutely not, considering Empire Strikes Back is an overwhelming fan favorite. And that movie came out before fan service was even a thing. So you could say there is no fan service in the original trilogy. But what also isn't in those movies is a writer going out of their way to tell a story that fans won't enjoy. The only thing I see of fan service from George Lucas in the original trilogy is that the main characters didn't die. Their stories reached a satisfying conclusion and you were left with a contented feeling and excited for the future content in books and comics that continued their stories. So at the end of the day, I think we can all agree that the last installment of this trilogy is far from perfect, but unfortunately, so is the rest of the trilogy. But to blame fans that didn't like The Last Jedi as the reason for The Rise of Skywalker being so bad is unfair. That is solely the responsibility of Disney and Lucasfilm. It is obvious that they were trying to make back their money as quickly as possible after their $4 billion acquisition. And their rush to produce episodes 7 through 9 had no clear direction. They were just making things up as they went along. And thus, the story suffered, and so did the fans. But all is not lost. I really enjoyed The Mandalorian Season 1, and it was a huge success with the majority of fans. And it seems to be the one bright spot in regards to fan service done right, by telling a good story with strong character development. I am hopeful as long as creators who respect the universe George Lucas created, like Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni, are involved in future projects. And again, I refer to Jon Favreau's interview regarding The Mandalorian and the fans. It's a great interview, and to me is clear evidence why The Mandalorian is being so well received. And I'll leave a link to that in the description.
Well, that's the thing, with especially with Star Wars, but always, you want to make sure, if you're making it and the fans don't dig what you're doing, I don't know that I could keep doing it. Like, part of it, a big part of it is that you want to connect. You want to connect with the fans. When you're taking on something like Star Wars, you know, I didn't create Star Wars. You know, I grew up with Star Wars, and so you want to make sure you're servicing it in a way that's respectful to what came before, and in a way that hopefully delights the audience and the fans.
I hope you enjoyed this video. While you're here, leave a like and subscribe, and let me know your thoughts on fan service in the movies. Thanks so much for your support, and as always, have a very nerdy day.